The Steelers know the Browns are going to be loading the box to stop the run. They're the best in the NFL at doing it. So how do the Steelers counter that? We talk about that here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here today with Shelby Cassessee. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things of the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use all across the FanDuel Sportsbook app. More on them later. As I said before, we're joined by Shelby Cassessee. You know her and love her at Channel 11. Shelby, Mike Tomlin talked Tuesday. The bye week's over, but there's getting a sense of now getting ready for the Browns. This is not the cupcake walk that I think that a lot of people, at least the Steelers, aren't talking about it like a cupcake walk like a lot of people think when they think of the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah. Hey, Chris. And I mean, that's exactly what you want to see the Steelers mindset be right now. You don't want them to think it's going to be a cakewalk. And I mean, I think it's reasonable to assume it's not going to be because divisional games are always not a cakewalk, especially in the AFC North. And even though the division's a mess right now, the Steelers have a great opportunity. These games are always tight and they're always won in the trenches.
Absolutely. And the trenches is where the Browns put a lot of investment. I asked Mike Tomlin because when I was doing my research on the Browns and personnel usage, Sports Information System charts the Browns to use one high safety shells as far as, putting only one safety back instead of two, the highest rate of anyone in the NFL, and two high safety shells, the lowest rate. And as far as stacking the boxes, they stack the box the third highest rate in the NFL. Point being, they are going to throw everything at stuffing the run, and that's worked out so far because they're allowing the fewest yards per carry going into this week. When I asked Mike Tomlin about that, listen how he answers that question, and then also the follow-up on the Steelers' usage of tight ends and how and why he uses them. Here was Mike Tomlin on Tuesday.
Like the Browns are allowing the fewest yards on the ground. They run a lot of one-high shells and stack the box a lot. What do you guys have to do after having your best run game yet this season when you guys were in Ireland?
Well, we better block them. We better run hard. We better finish off runs. We better have a finisher's attitude in terms of which direction the power falls. As you mentioned, they're elite in terms of run stopping. And so what does that mean? That means we got to be solid. We can't have unblocked people. But beyond that, we got to play well as a collective. We got to play physical and we got to finish. And we got to understand that, a successful day might be 3 and 4 yard runs at times. And we got to take what we can get sometimes from that regard.
How much of what you did and did well against Minnesota with the extra tight ends, heavier sets that you had is applicable moving forward, whether it's against Cleveland or anybody else, or was that just kind of a Minnesota specific thing?
No, we have a certain personality, particularly when we play 4-3 teams. I haven't been bashful about that. That's why we drafted Darnell Washington. You can't play 4-3 teams with 250-pound tight ends. You can't. They're weight classes in combat sport for a reason. And so when the edge people are 300 pounds, you better have somebody out there that looks like that animal. And so that was our intentions in Minnesota. And so certainly as we move into divisional play in the next couple of weeks and we're playing 2 4-3 teams, chances are you're going to see more of that. It's unfair at times to ask guys like Pat Freiermuth and Connor to block 4-3 ends. That's not real realistic if you want to have a real good run game day.
Mike, that's what I was just going to ask you. Would that help explain why Pat has played so few snaps actually through these first 4 games?
Well, I'm not talking about the totality of 4 games, but certainly last week the matchup component has a lot to do with how we distribute snaps at that position. When you're looking at 4-3 units, as I mentioned, you better have some big people in that C and D gap area.
Shelby, after the game, I did a film study on the game, and I just broke down. A big part of the run game was kind of what Tim Benz was talking about with his question, the usage of the tight ends. They were doing what are called wham blocks, where you set a tight end in motion from one side to the other, and then at the snap of the ball, they're still going in motion. And now they charge at a specific defender, usually an edge rusher, to try to seal them out of the play. And oftentimes, that was Dallas Turner, their second-year first-round pick that they're really excited to have in Minnesota. And because of that, going to Mike Tomlin said, they used Darnell Washington the most. And in fact, of all the skill players, Darnell Washington played the most snaps 2 weeks ago against the Vikings, even more than DK Metcalf or Kenneth Gainwell, which is kind of crazy. And then you had Connor Hayward get more snaps than Pat Freiermuth. I do think that there's a part of this plan that does fit in and said, hey, we need guys that are going to pitch in and be good against tough defenses up front, because you'll want to be able to run the ball, even if it's not necessarily getting 5 to 8 yards of play, even if, as Mike Tomlin talks about it, getting 3 or 4 yards against a really good run defense.
And I think you can certainly expect to see this on Sunday against Cleveland, especially considering this is going to be the toughest defensive front that the Steelers have seen to this point, which it's a good thing this young offensive line has had 4 weeks to kind of get going, get their feet under them. I think the game against the Vikings was the most improved we'd seen them to this point. And part of that being they got some help along the way. So I think we can definitely expect to see that. Mike Tomlin says he's been transparent about why they've been doing that. So against a team with a defensive front like the Browns, and then on top of that, you include the splash playability from Myles Garrett. This is a front that predicates itself on penetration and disruption. So adding those extra bodies in there, I think, is going to be what we're seeing a lot of. You have the line maybe sliding a bit toward Myles Garrett's direction. All the things that we see teams do week in and week out against Cleveland to try to minimize him, I think the Steelers are going to do their best to replicate. And on that topic in and of itself, this is a team that Mike Tomlin said himself today cannot be one-dimensional in their offensive attack. And we did see that against Minnesota. They tried to utilize more bodies up front to open up the run game, and it worked. It got Kenneth Gainwell nearly an 100-yard day with no Jaylen Warren available. So when you don't want to be one-dimensional and you have a team like the Browns constantly stacking the box, yeah, those big bodies are going to be up there. But the passing game has to work well too. And another thing, Chris, I think we saw a lot against the Vikings was because they got Aaron Rodgers a bit more time with those bodies up front, they were able to scheme open DK Metcalf in the short passing game a bit more. And so we're going to see a lot of the game plan from Sunday, I think, replicated, or 2 Sundays ago now, replicated this Sunday against the Browns.
Agree that this is something that the Steelers do. I think that with their run game right now to try to beef things up, they believe in this offensive line, but they also recognize this offensive line's still young, and you're going up against a defensive front that's highly talented, that's aggressive, and again, the Browns are sending their bodies. Looking at their tendencies, they're bringing their strong safety down a lot. They're packing the box a lot, and so when you're doing that and you want to kind of counterbalance that, you want to be able to run the ball at them and to give your offensive line the best chance. I think that's why passing to set up the run has been so big against teams that, where the linebackers are trying to decide, should they be aggressive in approaching the line of scrimmage or should they back off because they're passing the ball? And if you hit a pass play early, you can be able to say, okay, those linebackers could be on their heels. That gives your lineman a couple more steps that they can get set up in their run game. And then you saw last week what we said with the wham blocks, with the way that they're using tight ends, bringing help in, and also throwing in the extra lineman. Spencer Anderson, I could see being a big player for the Steelers this week, being able as that 6th offensive lineman. And Mike Tomlin wouldn't commit to it necessarily, but I think that's part of what you have in this arsenal. It's part of how this roster was built. It's why they've invested and went and got they kept 4 tight ends on the roster. I think for moments like this, instead of going and getting that second wide receiver that everyone keeps talking about.
And you heard Mike Tomlin reference it there. And I know that's been a big question, is where has Pat Freiermuth been? And especially against Minnesota, did not play a lot of snaps at all. And I mean, your answer is right there in the fact that they need to use these bigger bodies. And Pat Freiermuth is not the best blocking tight end, but that's why you draft a guy like Darnell Washington to step in those moments. And I think the big question was, well, Arthur Smith loves to use tight ends, so why isn't he using his highest paid tight end and the most veteran tight end on this team? Well, as much as Arthur Smith likes to use tight ends, he likes to run the football more. And so putting the big bodies up there first and foremost gets that ground game going. I think especially if you don't see a lot of Calvin Austin this week, or if he can't play, which I don't know about you, Chris, but I was surprised to hear Mike Tomlin leave the door open for both Calvin Austin and Jalen Ramsey. You could see a bit more of Pat Freiermuth, but I mean, don't expect a ton of that as well, because if they can't get the ground game going, that's going to be the priority here, and giving Aaron Rodgers protection in the quick passing game.
Absolutely. And I think that's going to be a big part of trying to counter the Browns. And that'll tie into our next segment. We talk about Aaron Rodgers, because Mike Tomlin also talked about how they try to scheme guys open and how it's different to scheme guys open for a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, who can see so many more things. We'll talk about that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Shelby Cassessee, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, remind you, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. With the NFL season here, and FanDuel is making it sure that you're ready for all the action with this can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your first $5 bet hits, you'll win $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. You can do player props, build same-game parlays, or even jump in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet to get your chance at winning $300 in bonus bets only on FanDuel. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm Chris Carter here with Shelby Cassessee of Channel 11 WPXI. Shelby, Mike also talked about Aaron Rodgers and how they try to scheme things up for him, which is also big because I think in the past several years, the last time the Steelers swept the Browns was 2021, Ben Roethlisberger's last year. Since then, there's always been that one game that they've dropped. It's always been in Cleveland. And granted, this game isn't in Cleveland, but still, there's a recognition that they can be dangerous and a lot of it does stem from their defense. And I think it's going to be important to give Aaron Rodgers some of those looks where he's going to be able to take advantage of them being aggressive, because Jim Schwartz, the defensive coordinator, is an aggressive defensive play caller. But let's listen to how Mike Tomlin talked about when it came to scheming guys open for Aaron Rodgers and it being different.
DK's had 3 really big home run after catch plays, 2 against New York and the 1 in Ireland. They're all 3 pretty astute moments of recognition from Aaron. Like motioned somebody away, lots of space in the deep end, he took it 81 yards for a touchdown. How much can Aaron highlight that for DK kind of in the moment at the line of scrimmage when he sees there's something available for him?
Boy, you're reaching there. Aaron's an experienced quarterback, man. He makes good and timely decisions. When you get the ball to big people with top end speed, that's what happens. When you do it on time. And his ability to operate on time creates run after opportunities, not only for DK, but for everyone. And certainly DK has a skill set that's capable of producing the plays that you mentioned.
So looking at that, Shelby, I think part of what you're looking at here, not just for DK Metcalf, you're trusting Aaron Rodgers to make so many smart decisions to find the weak spots in their defense. And that's something that a Jim Schwartz defense does kind of allow if you're patient enough to continue to do it and do it consistently and accurately. Because there's times the Steelers defense has kind of played this way where they'll be so aggressive that and keep you from being able to take the big shot at times that they're going to force you to dink and dunk your way around. And that if you can be that consistent quarterback that can hit 8 passes in a drive for 4 or 5 yards at a time, good on you. You'll move the ball on us. But they're going to trust that eventually their pressure is going to win, or you're just going to miss, or their coverage is going to win. And that's a lot of the way the Browns play. I think that's what the Steelers are going to have to balance, making sure Aaron Rodgers has the right opportunities to exploit that.
And that's why he's here, right? He's not exactly winning games with his legs anymore. He's here for his processing speed, for his arm strength, for his accuracy. And Mike Tomlin referencing it there, that he's able to get the ball accurately out in space and allow guys to make plays after the catch. I mean, truth be told, I think DK Metcalf is one of the more valuable players on this team so far. He hasn't necessarily had the amount of reps, but when he does touch the ball, it is always impactful. And part of that, I mean, I know Mike Tomlin said that's a reach, but part of that is because him and Aaron Rodgers are forming that connection. Aaron Rodgers is using that processing speed. He's using the scheme to his advantage to get DK Metcalf open in space and allowing him to make the play after the fact. And really, you know, we talk about the guys up front. All of that timing starts with protection. If this offensive line can continue to give Aaron Rodgers just a couple of extra seconds and he can use that processing speed before the ball's snapped, I think the Steelers have an advantageous matchup here.
There's a chance that it's there. One thing that the Browns do, and there's a phrase called middle of the field close and middle of the field open. And basically, middle of the field close is a lot of what the Browns do. They go run one high safety look. They put a lot on taking away the middle part of the field so that you have to dink and dunk, where you'll work the perimeters, work the underneath passes, and that's where you can find some success against them. But they're willing to concede those because they feel like if they take away the middle part of the field, you won't get those bigger plays because you hit like DK Metcalf on a slant that he goes for 80 yards. You're hitting him more so towards the boundary where he has less room to run. And I think that's what you're going to see a lot of the Browns, according to sports information systems. The Browns use middle of the field closed type coverage at the 8th highest rate of any team in the NFL. And so I think that's where the Steelers have to be prepared for their offense to take advantage of those moments. They do need to be able to run the ball. They do need to be able to counter that with their heavy sets. But bring it, like Pat Freiermuth, where Pat Freiermuth is, I will say this. I do think Pat Freiermuth has blocked better this year than he has at any point in his career. But I get that Pat Freiermuth is not primarily a blocking tight end. That's why Darnell Washington got so many snaps 2 weeks ago against the Vikings. But I do think that if you put him in this situation, Pat Freiermuth is a guy that gets good yards after the catch. If in space, he's a guy that can win in man coverage. And if Denzel Ward is on DK Metcalf and Greg Newsome is on Roman Wilson or Scotty Miller, whoever else is out there at wide receiver, you're going to be able to find a Darnell Washington, a Pat Freiermuth, a Jonnu Smith, probably underneath, working in space and getting open for Aaron Rodgers to get them the ball, them get upfield and get some extra yards because they'll be able to run through a tackle or two. And I think that is an underrated part of what the Steelers need to have this week against the Browns.
And that's the big question with the receivers room in general. It was the big question entering the year was, okay, if one of these top contributors is injured, who steps up? How do you maneuver the offense when there just aren't a lot of big time weapons? And Calvin Austin has been a very serviceable number 2 and a guy that Aaron Rodgers has started to really look for in certain moments, I think. So with him either not 100% or not playing at all, I do think you have an opportunity now for a little bit more tight end usage in the passing game. Again, it's going to just be predicated on the ability for the Steelers to establish the run maybe a little bit first and not be so one-dimensional. And I think that's where you're going to find success.
I agree. It's finding a way to force the Browns into making tough decisions themselves. That's how you dictate the pace of play. It's not always just about being able to be the strongest team in running the ball or, in doing that. It's forcing them into tough decisions. And when you find their weak spots and then they start to hit that, I think, like, for example, in the Steelers of the 2000s, they would love to blitz you to take away the middle part of the field. They forced you to dink and dunk. But what was the team that hurt them the most? The Patriots, because Tom Brady was so good at consistently, okay, you're giving me the 5 yards here, the 5 yards there, I will take that all day. Similarly for Patrick Mahomes, where everyone remembers like his big passes to Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce down the field. Oftentimes, it's Patrick Mahomes being able to get the ball out before 2 seconds are even up because he's quickly reading where you're at. That's where Aaron Rodgers has to be on point this week. And if he is, I think it opens up so much more for the offense because now once you're hitting those plays, even if those plays don't break for an 80-yard touchdown, if it goes for 5 or 6 yards, those start to count like the way you think of running plays count. They will wear down a defense, and eventually the defense will say, all right, we have to start to take that away. Otherwise, he's going to keep killing us. And then all of a sudden, then your run game opens up because now those linebackers, their first thought isn't, hey, step to the gap, get in Broderick Jones's face or get in Zach Frazier's face, make sure we don't let Jalen Warren go off. Their first thought is, we got to get out in this space over here, and that's taking away from all their efforts to stuff the run.
And it's okay for the Steelers offense. It's okay to not have, and more actually preferable to have these quick scoring drives. It's more preferable against a defense like the Browns to have these sustained drives that you're staying on schedule and you're getting into third and short situations and you're converting and you're kind of methodically moving down the field with a defense that likes to get after you, that likes to use a lot of energy and penetration to kind of wear them down slowly but surely. If they're going to give you the underneath stuff, that's perfectly fine, especially with a team like the Steelers that can create these yak situations. And with a guy like Aaron Rodgers who can see things well before the snap and who has just that quick processing speed. And if you scheme him up things that are short but impactful, you could have success there.
Absolutely. I want to talk about this team's mentality because the Steelers sit atop the AFC North, and there's a lot of talk going on right now across the nation about how the AFC North has flopped and is wide open for the taking. But how are the Steelers taking it? We've been in the locker room. We've talked to Coach Tomlin. We'll give you a sense of how we're seeing them talking about it here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Shelby Cassessee, stick with us. We'll be right back.
I'm Cody Rourke from Locked On Broncos, and this episode is brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus powered by Peloton IQ. This is Peloton's most advanced equipment yet, giving you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or you're cross-training with your favorite instructors like Alex Toussaint. It's training reimagined to make your workout more personal. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with features that help you plan, stay motivated, and hit peak performance. You can let yourself run, lift, flex, and go while Peloton handles all the rest. Plus, Peloton IQ provides real-time strength coaching, tracking your progress and suggesting weights that challenge you so you can get stronger. Plus, the new movement tracking camera, it counts your reps and corrects your form in real time, making sure every rep is safer and smarter. So let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter here with Shelby Cassessee of Channel 11 WPXI. Shelby, we've been talking to the players, and listen, it's a very big topic in the NFL right now, especially because the Ravens are the team that are on the ground right now in the AFC North. They're 1-4. I expected the Ravens to hit a couple bumps in the road early in the season. They played some really good teams, the Chiefs, the Bills, the Lions, but I did not expect them to start 1-4 to their season. And there is a door open for the Steelers where if they can beat these next two Ohio teams, and the Ravens do lose to a good Rams team this upcoming Sunday, the Steelers could be looking at 5-1 while the Ravens are 1-5. The Browns are they're the Browns. You know that the Browns is the Browns, and then the Bengals. I mean, they're trading for Joe Flacco at this point because of how bad their situation is. Their offensive line is still terrible. Their defense is still terrible. But Shelby, when we talk to these players, I get that there's a sense that they recognize it, but they're not letting the opportunity be too loud when it comes to their preparation right now.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting just going around the locker room Monday. You got a mix of answers when guys were asked if they paid attention, if they watched over the weekend. And some of them said, they poked around here and there. Alex Highsmith straight up was like, yeah, I watched every game and I'm glad all those teams lost. And then you had other guys that said, I just took time with family. I wasn't really around football, but they all were aware of where they stood. That doesn't mean that they necessarily are hyped up about it. They didn't take that to be overly confident, but they were all aware of where they stood. And they all understand the opportunity that they have in front of them right now. And I think that's where we've seen teams in years past kind of struggle. When a door was open for them, they didn't always walk through it. When there was a big opportunity to control their own destiny, they didn't always take advantage. And so I think this point in the season, even though it's early, but with the way the division's playing out, these next couple of games will kind of tell us if this Steelers team has a little bit of a different attitude and a little bit of a different ability to capitalize than the ones we've seen in years past. Because if they can win these two games, they are sitting in a really good position, and it'll show kind of where they sit with the rest of the division, because these AFC North games are always so competitive. But if they can have dominant wins over these next two teams, which I think they're capable of doing, we'll have a much better idea of what this team is about.
And I hear you there on the opportunities missed in the past. I mean, you think back to last year, the Steelers at one point were 10-3, which is kind of crazy to think about when everyone remembers, well, they finished so poorly. But at 10-3, they had 2 games on the Ravens with 4 games to go for each of them. They lost all their games. The Ravens won all their games. And that was kind of a rough way for the Steelers to end their season after the good start that they had. But even the year before, they weren't as dominant, but they were sitting at 7-4 at one point, heading into back-to-back home games against a bad Cardinals team and a bad Patriots team, and then a middling Colts team, and they lost all 3 of those games to fall to 7-7. Well, the Ravens weren't bad at the time. They were 7-3 when they were 7-4, and so they were a half game back of the Ravens. They could have put pressure on them late in the season. They didn't. They did. Now both times they do end up making the playoffs. They did enough to get that done. And this isn't that late in the season, like, the finish line, this isn't the home stretch, but this is an opportunity where, listen, I talked to Juan Thornhill, he was telling me, like, listen, we know who the Ravens are. We know that they're banged up. They're going to bounce back. And they're not banking that the Ravens are just going to stay bad all year. I think they see there is a door open here that if they can walk through it and you're the Steelers and you do that, you give yourself a chance to build up a lead, because the Ravens, imagine the Ravens get good again. They get Lamar Jackson back. They get Roquan Smith back, Marlon Humphrey, Kyle Hamilton, all the guys that have been suffering from injuries. Then those games after their bye week against the Bears, against the Dolphins, against the Vikings, against the Browns, against the Jets, 2 games against the Bengals. Those are quick ways for them to rack those wins back up. And then all of a sudden they're sitting at 8 or 9 wins heading into late December. And if you're the Steelers and you don't have 10 or 11, you're thinking like, man, those last couple games are going to be tough. And again, the last game of the season is against Baltimore in Pittsburgh. And the way things are shaping out, if the Ravens do rebound and the Steelers are able to keep a lead that isn't, if it comes down to less than 2 games of a lead and is a 1-game lead for the Steelers, or they're tied at the end of the season, that's going to be a game where both teams play their starters, because they're going to be fighting for the division.
When is the Ravens bye week, by the way? Do you have that information on you?
Week 7. So after this week, they play the Rams this week. They get their bye, and then they play the Bears.
Okay. So, I mean, hamstring injuries are so tricky, I know, but I could envision a world where Lamar Jackson doesn't play again this week and they rest him, like you get the rest for the bye, and then he's back. And then that stretch you mentioned, they're going to be back. I think that's a pretty, I put money on the Ravens not winding up the way their season's going right now. But I remember, Chris, last year, you and I and Jenna doing the schedule show here at Channel 11, and the way their schedule played out, where it looked like the front half was much easier than the back half. Let's put it that way. And we all said, if they want to make a push for the postseason, they need to take advantage of the opportunities early in the year, because the back half of the year is going to be so difficult. I don't think we expected the back half of the year to play out like it did, but that essentially worked out that way, where it was a good thing that they got their wins. They stacked some wins early, because they wouldn't have gotten into the postseason had that not been the case. So it's almost a similar situation right now with the way the division's playing out. They have a big opportunity right now. They do have some more challenging games in the back half of the year. Take advantage of the fact that, even though the Browns do have some good weapons on defense, it's still the Cleveland Browns. It's still a rookie quarterback, which Mike Tomlin always has success against. The Thursday night game against Cincinnati, I think, becomes a bit more interesting when you plug Joe Flacco in there and you consider the fact that the Steelers just aren't good on Thursday night road games in the division. But long haul for the Bengals, I mean, if prime Joe Burrow isn't able to function with that offensive line, 40-plus-year-old Joe Flacco is not going to be able to do it either. So your prime competition is still going to be the Baltimore Ravens. They are going to make a surge here in the back half of the year. I think when Lamar Jackson's a bit healthier, guys on defense are a bit healthier, their bye week certainly coming at a prime time for them. This is a big opportunity for the Steelers. Can they skirt the trends of previous years and actually walk through the open door here? I think is going to be the key for them.
Is going to be a key for them for sure. Shelby, everyone knows me. I'm very much an X's and O's guy. I talk about matchups. I talk about, stats and schemes and how those things mesh and try to bring that out. But there's sometimes, Shelby, there are other powers at work. And whatever it is, the Steelers have never won a road divisional game again on Thursday Night Football. And it started in 2006, and it has never happened. They've always lost them. Granted, they've never played the Bengals. It's always been the Browns or the Ravens, but it has never worked in their favor, and it would be a heck of a time to finally break that curse. Even though the Bengals are a bad football team right now, even though they just got old man Joe Flacco to sit behind that offensive line that couldn't protect Joe Burrow, I still look at this and I say, man, I do not doubt the powers of whatever curse has been on them in those situations. But to your point, I think sometimes what happens in those short weeks is that you get less time to prepare. It speeds up your game plan. It speeds up your work. And so many times I think that Ben Roethlisberger's biggest strength was not his extra preparation, was often his game mentality, his gunslinger.
Up in the dirt.
Exactly. And I think that sometimes that played against you when you try to do the short weeks where you didn't have as much time to put into that, and you needed that preparation to carry you a bit more. And then since Ben Roethlisberger's been gone, you've had Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, Mason Rudolph, you've had Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, and it really hasn't worked in your favor. Now you're getting Aaron Rodgers, who is Mr. Prepared, who is that is his expertise. To your point, if they walk through the door, and the walk through the door is handle your business against the Browns this week, turn around the short week, play another divisional opponent, and beat the Bengals on the road, then you go 5-1. You get the long weekend, and then yes, you do have some rough games ahead of that. You play the Packers, the Colts, the Chargers in back-to-back weeks, and all three of those teams look pretty good right now. But you set yourself up where you're 5-1 going into that. Even if you go 1-2 in that stretch, you're still 6-3. And so you give yourself the space to be able to recover from that. But again, that's why I think, like you're talking about, they've got to exercise whatever demons they got with the Thursday Night Football, and they have to walk through the door that's here right now so they can walk into better doors as the season continues.
Yeah, and I remember the game was on our air in Cleveland, that Thursday night game. We were all in Cleveland, and I remember looking at that matchup and thinking, oh my gosh, the Browns are giving up the most sacks in the league at the time. Obviously, the Steelers pass rush was fully healthy on a night game where they normally just excel and create that splash play. I thought, and just not having the experience on the offensive side of the ball for the Browns, I thought this is the perfect formula for the Steelers to win. Finally exercise those demons, and they didn't. There's something about it, and I mean, you pointed to those factors, short preparation, but the opposing team has the same hurdles to jump over. So again, it's a gut check moment for this team. I think, are we going to be able to see kind of a different personality and a different character than we've seen in years past? It doesn't, when you look at it on paper, it may not feel that way because again, it's a bad Browns team, it's a bad Bengals team, but this is still AFC North football, and it's an opportunity for them to set themselves up for the rest of the year. And they're aware of that opportunity being in the locker room on Monday.
Absolutely. We'll talk more about that as the week continues. We got Crossover Thursday where we cross over with Locked On Browns here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. That comes up tomorrow. Shelby, thanks so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let people that can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yep, at Shelby Cassessee on Twitter, on Instagram, and you can see me on Channel 11.
Absolutely. Just great work there. Shelby, thank you for joining us. And thank you all for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, wherever you get your social media. My handle is always at Carter Critiques. You can read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by going to post-gazette.com. And you can find me here every day, Monday through Friday, on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our daily episodes from the Locked On Steelers podcast. Crossover Thursday tomorrow.